you're going to have this mass adrenaline release. And when this happens, the mindset determines so much of what your body does with that adrenaline. Does it dump and flood the system and totally knock you out? Or can you process it because this is calm?
Welcome back to the Max Out Show, where I'm on a mission to help you unleash your full potential. Today's guest is Brandon Powell, founder of PHYR, black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and instructor of the Wim Hof Method that has taken the world by storm over the last few years and is now practiced by some of the highest performers in the world. And that's exactly what we'll talk about today: how to use breathing and ice to master your mind and live your life on fire. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Max, for having me.
Man, I'm super excited to have you on the show. It's, for our listeners, to give you guys a little bit of a recap, I guess. I've been, practicing Wim Hof Method, ice bathing for about a year now. So I have, Switzerland where I live, I have a huge river flowing through the Rhine. And in winter, I started about a year ago in February, right? With a bunch of friends, it was like 5 degrees Celsius, so like 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And we just started jumping in basically to see who's the biggest badass, right? Like who can, last the longest, right? And you're just freezing in there. But what we realized so quickly is like there's such tremendous benefits to this, right? You feel this energy, this vitality, the mental strength. You're just able to crush your fears and break through obstacles faster. So I've become a huge fan. So for people that have never heard of Wim Hof, the Wim Hof Method, can you share a little bit about what it really is about?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Simply, the method itself is about, like you said, breath work, cold exposure, be it gradually building up your time that you can endure it, and then ultimately mindset. How you're going to approach these things, and then the way that it all links together, and that's the Wim Hof Method. But the all of these things, like where they can all go. I mean, each one is its own, it's its own system. And then, for instance, you don't need to be a Wim Hofer to jump into cold water, but when you start to understand how you can really utilize like the energy and the power you were talking about feeling when you go in, how you can sort of take that external creation and turn it inward, and it really becomes something that you can use as fuel. And that's why I think so many performers are into it.
Yeah, for sure. It's just such an incredible way to really face discomfort and practice getting through that. So how much do you think, I'm really curious, how much do you think the mindset is a result of practicing the breathing and practicing the ice versus its own practice?
Well, the mindset, if at least currently, if you were to speak to Wim, I believe he would say that it all comes down to the mind. We access, we can use the breath as a tool to access aspects of the physiology, but that the mind, everything is starting there, right? And what ends up happening is when you practice, especially the cold, but the breathing as well, you have to consciously decide, this is something I want to step into, especially the cold. The cold, every time you're going to step up, you have to make this conscious decision. You can, jump straight into the cold water and get the shock and jump right out, right? But that's not exactly how we approach it. The idea of the Wim Hof Method is that we enter the water calm and we leave the water calm. And, and we take that power that becomes present through the nervous system, we take it and we actually can, consciously accept the impact, which helps you process better, right? And in a time like we're in right now, where I feel like maybe people don't process they don't process maybe fear as thoroughly as they should, this is a great conversation to have, because where we're at in society is a lot of people running on probably a higher frequency of sympathetic nervous system activity, you know?
Yeah, for sure. What I find so fascinating, it's actually a practice of elevating consciousness, right? Of becoming more aware of your body, of becoming more aware of how you're feeling. So it's not like, you jump in the water, like you're saying, you try to shut out your emotions, right? You try to forget about the pain. You're actually becoming so much more conscious of how every single muscle and fiber in your body is feeling. And that practice of just getting more aware is so powerful. So let's break them down, all three of them: the breathing, the ice, the mindset. And maybe let's start with the breathing, because it's, I think, just the easiest for people to really start using, right? Because it's not quite as painful as the ice, honestly. So what does that breath work look like?
Well, the beauty of the method is its simplicity, and so taking just one round to look at, essentially, and then you're going to stack the rounds in repetition. It's 30 breaths to a breath hold, and we're working with hypoxic states and breath holding at that point to create chemistry. I mean, well, really the whole process from start to finish is to alter the chemistry to get a specific result. So, initially we're breathing at such a rate as to be able to blow off CO2. We blow off CO2. What that does is lower the need to take a breath in, because CO2 is lowered, oxygen's at full saturation, and then you can go into the breath hold. And so you have 30 breaths to breath hold, and then a recovery breath. So after you hold your breath for as long as you can, and feeling, we say don't force. So I think that's a big idea, is you don't want to force this to the point to where you could pass out potentially from the breathing. So we don't want to push and strain our body in that kind of way, but we hold our breath for as long as we can, and then we take a big recovery breath. You hold that breath for 10-15 seconds, and then you start the round over again. 30 breaths, breath hold, recovery breath. 30 breaths, breath hold, recovery breath. And so that's the essential practice of the method. Where it becomes interesting is within the ability to sort of, manipulate it in different ways. I mean, are you breathing through your mouth, for instance? Are you breathing through your nose? What are the benefits of doing one versus the other? Are you holding the exhale as your breath hold, or are you holding the inhale as your breath hold? Now, specifically, the Wim Hof practice is to take a full breath in. And so this means allowing complete inhale and then exhaling partially. So the exhale, it's sort of like, so there's still residual oxygen left in the lungs, right? And we keep this particular pattern reoccurring. So and I'm doing it through my mouth to emphasize the breath. But if you choose to breathe through your nose, Wim jokingly says, any hole, we'll take any hole, just get it in. And, and basically full breath in, partial exhale. And that would be the same way when you approach your breath hold. Hold. So, that is the fundamental way to practice the Wim Hof method. The benefits are many. So it's really one of the most fascinating things that I found about the method when I came to it was my reasons for coming to it weren't everybody else's reasons for coming to it. And so, that really, diversified the audience and and the group of people that I would work with and have worked with all around, internationally and all around my country. And what I've found is that, there's, it's interesting, how people are different and the same in a lot of ways, right? So,
Yeah.
what I see are it's a commonality sort of in the various groups that show up, and then some, even though they could be diversified as people, there's this thread that's running through that they want to empower themselves, maybe challenge themselves, and whether, literally, I don't say this as just, I don't know, a way to kind of build the method, but one of the most amazing people that ever came to one of my workshops was an 84-year-old lady who treated the ice water like it was just an absolute gift, and she had so much fun. And I was a little nervous when I saw her approaching the ice, as I can be with anybody, because you never know how people are going to react. I'm not overly nervous, but I'm always, right there with everybody,
Yeah, sure.
trying to make sure that they're going to get through the experience, because we usually provide quite a challenging ice bath for people to endure. And so she got in and handled it. She was throwing the ice up in the air, rolling all around, going underwater, coming up. I mean, it was amazing. And so, the thing about it is the mindset definitely plays a part, but our life experiences, the things we bring to it, it all sort of gets shown out in this method. And the breathing maybe is one of the best possible ways to release emotion, and so when I say that, I don't necessarily mean like something that's even very conscious. Quite often I've heard people say, I found myself doing the method, and this is usually people that are doing it for the first time or the first few times, and they say, I found myself doing the method and just breaking down in tears, and I have no idea why. And I've seen it a lot. And with all kinds of people, with all kinds of people that you would never think would maybe show that much emotion publicly. I've seen some people really, really find just absolute beauty and release and all kinds of stuff just in 20 to 40 minutes of breath work. You know what I mean? Like, just absolutely amazing the impact it can have on people, because it is altering our chemistry. And so if you're interested in that, we can obviously go down that path and talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. And for our listeners, I mean, there's so many great videos online of this exactly happening, right? Of some of, the biggest influencers, the highest, performers in the world doing the breathing, right? And oftentimes they're tearing up literally on camera because it's such a blissful experience. So what's happening in the body then that allows us to get into the state?
Well, the chemistry is altered. So when you're blowing off CO2, this has an effect on your pH. And ultimately, by lowering the CO2, we raise our pH. So our pH goes more into the alkaline, right? And we've been able to show hitting true alkalinity at 8, at 8, essentially. If you understand the scale of how it works, we basically sit at a 7.3 between acid, base, and alkaline. And the alkalinity can, we don't want it to be spiked for long periods of time, but the idea of the method is we're stretching it internally. So we raise it up a little bit and it spikes, and this can have a really profound effect, internally, as far as like resistance to pathogen and so forth. What made it actually a method was Wim displaying the ability to to suppress his immune system under the stress of a bacterium, an inert bacteria in his system, E. coli, essentially, in the system that, should have brought about a cytokine storm, that would, like, inflammatory related storm that would have made him, go through things that 1,000 people at least had displayed under the same scrutiny. And so they had, fever, nausea, and so forth, sickness aspects of food poisoning. And he basically was able to suppress all that down, as they're testing his blood and so forth. They can see that that along with various other things, but what we're finding is, in relation to your question, that, the breathing creates this chemistry that really allows you to calmly suppress the overreaction of fear, and that could be an uncontrolled fear, essentially your body overreacting to a stimulus. Because where our autoimmune dysfunctions and things come from, the things that people, a lot of people turn to the Wim Hof Method for, is because our body is overreacting. And Wim is showing us that we can tone the system so that our body, instead of overreacting, is very resilient in the face of all these things. So there's the overarching chemistry of, like, let's say, raising dopamine levels, raising serotonin levels, raising, oxytocin levels, right? Basically jamming the body with endogenous floods of cannabinoid and opioids, turning on aspects of the brain related to our deep emotional centers like love, and like really connecting into all of this stuff that can actually be fully documented and has been in studies, and shown that this is all a conscious effort to create this chemistry that makes you internally very, like I said, resilient. And that process, moving into that process, I should say, strengthen your body, because you have to put in the reps. What happens is all of this, like, shift in consciousness, and that is, sometimes for people, one breath session and they're just totally hooked because they can't believe how powerful that is. It doesn't last. At least I should say, from a sense of being overwhelming. It's not overwhelming forever if you're consistent with your practice and training. But you know that it comes through, and that it always delivers. It's a great system that, like, that's the beauty of the ice, actually, is that every time the ice will always give you the same results, but it's your mindset that will determine how you evolve through the repetition and the processes.
Gosh, I love that so much. First of all, I mean, all of this, like you're saying, is scientifically proven, right? And so what I love about it is, like, you're literally awakening the neurochemistry in your brain to sort of optimize itself for human flourishing, for happiness, for joy, for love, for ecstasy, for deeper awareness of how you're actually living, how you're feeling, right? It's a way of really connecting with the deeper parts of ourselves. And that's what I love about it. And at the same time, it allows us to, down-regulate that fear response, like you're saying, right? And this, I think, is so critical. And, I love when I hear, messages and ideas from different angles. So I was just talking to Jared Robbins, who's the son of Tony Robbins, whom you may know. And he was telling the exact same thing. We're talking about fears, and he was saying there's two things you can do to down-regulate fear. You can do deep breathing, and you can do cold showers. Like, it's the exact same thing. And so I love getting these ideas from the, different kind of people and different messengers, because that just speaks to the truth of them. So So I'm really curious, like, would you also recommend the breathing aspect, for example, for, you know, a business person that's about to go in this meeting and have a difficult conversation with their boss? Is that something that you would also use directly before you're about to, you know, face a challenge like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just by doing it daily, you're priming your system for it, you know, but you know, for stress for the day. So in other words, 20 minutes of practice, 30 minutes of practice in the morning can really prime your system for the whole day to deal with, to mitigate stress. And, you know, so if you, and I have, for instance, I have worked in really, I've worked with some client, or I should say some corporate clientele that you would consider to be cream of the crop when it comes to, you know, big trades and investments and so forth, you know, and these guys, we've done ice baths right before they go into meetings. I mean, literally, or so the breath work. So yes, I have absolutely done this in scenarios where you know, people were utilizing it like this. But I think that the daily practice, and really what that was for, was to try and get certain people to perform in specific ways right then and there. But I've also worked with athletes in probably a lot more athletes than I have businessmen. But and quite often the athletes I've worked with are also businessmen, you know. So the athletes that I've worked with, what we're doing with them is conditioning over them over a period of time, because, and I have an athlete that I know would tell this exact story. Sometimes you really only have a moment and maybe one or two breaths to really sync up to what you're going to have to deal with. You know, and that's how real stress works.
Yeah.
So when something comes out of the ordinary, kind of like what the world is dealing with at the moment, when something comes out of the ordinary, you know, the stress is on you. Now, this current corona stress didn't come from, let's say, a rhino being in the room. It's invisible, which makes it even something more unique to talk about. But when you're dealing with that situation where you have a fight, like if a fight breaks out, how do you immediately gain control before you're stepping in to actually have to defend yourself?
Yeah, you can't say like, hey, time out, like give me 5 minutes.
Right. And so when we consciously step into the cold, and especially if you are to sink down and get it over your chest, you know what I mean? And so that your heart and lungs are underneath the water, you're going to have this mass adrenaline release. And when this happens, the mindset determines so much of what your body does with that adrenaline. Does it dump and flood the system and totally knock you out? Or can you process it because this is calm?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that training of presenting yourself with the adrenaline rush, but keeping yourself calm under that stress, will allow you, after you can maybe make that shift in one or two breaths, will allow you to, like, as an athlete in a situation that I can, talk about. I had an athlete who was expecting a certain time to have to compete, and she had to compete much faster. They called her when she thought she had like 30 minutes to prepare. She was up within the next, minute or two. And so it was just immediately organize the brain, detach, catch the breath, everything, prepared herself. And she was super calm going into the match, and she won. And so the point is that I've seen that switch happen with athletes very fast, and I believe that comes with the conditioning or I should say the daily conditioning of the breath.
Yeah, for sure. Love that, right? Like it is this daily practice, this long-term, weekly, monthly practice, right? That allows you then to be ready in that moment. So you don't need that, like, 20-minute, breathing before. So you mentioned before, like, 20 to 30 minutes is sort of ideal for the breathing. Is that's sort of what people should shoot for?
Yeah, I mean, that's how, if you look at the Wim Hof science, what they recommend is, I'll make it loose, 20 to 40 minutes to getting sort of the peak results. And, once you hit the peak, you can continue to push if you would like. I've done the breath a lot longer than that. But you can also, know that at that point, you've gotten your body to that full state. And the idea is that at that point, you have altered the chemistry to the necessary needs of what we consider the daily, I should say the necessary needs for your daily responses.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So for people that don't, have 20 to 40 minutes a day, is there like some kind of minimum threshold that people can hit and still get at least the, I guess, biggest amount of benefits they can get out of 5-10 minutes? I don't know. Is there like a minimum threshold?
Yeah. I mean, we have like Wim does it's really just about the rounds, right? Mm-hmm. So how long you hold your breath and so forth. So if you do 30 breaths, there's no real time limit on that, but it usually is going to take somewhere between, let's say, 30 seconds and a minute, right, to do 30 breaths. Once, and that's again a big gap that I'm giving, but so you do your 30 breaths, and then you go into the breath hold. The breath hold, I mean, I've known people that can hold their breath for a really long time, and they find out that they can through this method. Yeah. I've also known people that can't hold for very long. So the idea there is the perfect range is about 1.5 minutes on the breath hold. So we want to try to shoot or build up to about 1.5 minutes. And again, that is shown that that's where the peak result lies. Is if you can continue to hold your breath after that, it's fine. Then you have your recovery breath that you hold that for 10 seconds or so, 15 seconds, you let it go. And that's on the inhale, holding the inhale in like you've come out of water. Big recovery breath, hold the breath, let it go. And then you start again. Now, if you want to repeat that, let's say 1 or 2 times, you can add exercise in with it, say hypoxic exercise, where maybe you do a round of the breathing, just exactly how it should be done, 30 breaths, breath hold, recovery breath. Then you go into the second round and you do 30 breaths. And then when you go to your breath hold, we have a push-up exercise that we do where we see how many push-ups we can do on the breath hold, all right? So you try to crank out as many push-ups as you can. And it's really, again, about we're tapping into various energy sources, lactate and so forth, and we push into being able to do people. I have literally seen, and I'm a trainer, and I'm not one that is the easiest to get stuff over on. I have seen 100 clean push-ups done on a single breath hold.
Wow.
So, that usually really blows people's minds. And I mean, granted, this was done by an athlete who practices the method, but 100 clean push-ups on a breath hold. And so that is what we call the Wim Hof 5-minute workout. So single round or 2 rounds, a single regular round, and then a round with push-ups. This will give you a great charge. Really clears the brain out. A couple of rounds is usually necessary to really feel like you've cleaned out. The method is Wim's orientation around being exposed to many different scenarios where fear was present. And this reoccurrence of understanding how to deal with it through the breath. So he had the presence of mind of knowing that if he basically, and you have to understand his background, Wim was a great climber and mountaineer and so forth, but he also has an extensive background in yoga. And, in his 30s and so forth, you could see pictures of him with yogic in his abilities, like he was something special, really. And so when you see the fact he had invested years' time to develop his abilities in yoga, you could tell that a lot of this training has its basis there. I'm not going to speak for him and say, it's this or that, but Wim's breathing is reminiscent to me of a cleansing breath in yoga, also known as like the breath of fire. Which is to say that he's stoking the fire by cleansing everything out, right? And there are parallels, though his method is not. There are parallels between his breathing and the practice of Tumo, which is a Tibetan practice known as inner fire. And the idea is that through our breathing, we can manipulate our body temperature. This occurs in the practice and will help you, resist pathogen. I mean, that's essentially what a temperature is, right? It's our body raising up to fight pathogen. But we can enter into these autonomic states, which is what the science ultimately proves with the method, is that we can enter into these autonomic states that, essentially it was thought to be something that couldn't be done. And we can consciously enter into these states through the activation of the number one autonomic response that we have, which is breathing, right? Breathing is a doorway for you to understand, I believe, that this is something you can consciously control, or it's something that can control your consciousness. So your breathing, under uncontrolled stress, let's say, will dictate to you a sense of panic. And you can see that when somebody enters into like the cold water, for instance, and they're not prepared mentally. And so, because most of the time from what I have seen, if it's not all of the time, it's a mental thing. Yeah. And, and it exposes a lot of that to you, and it shows you maybe you're not ready for it right away. So we always promote gradual exposure to the cold to prepare your mind, and the nervous system too, because the nervous system plays a big part. I mean, all of these things are filtering in, and you're having to process all of it at the same time. Your conscious mind, your nervous system's response, which is constriction and all of these things that are creating fear and panic. So, all of that left uncontrolled creates havoc. But when we get it into control, we can find actually resonance and peace amongst all of it,
Yeah, for sure. It's such a beautiful feeling to be in control, to be in that ice water, right? And like it's freezing cold, but you're able to withstand it by controlling your mind. So let's talk about this next part here, which is the ice water, right? Like what are sort of the benefits of getting into this ice cold water, and like how long should people do it?
Well, when we do a workshop, the idea is that we expose people to about 2 minutes of cold water. We're looking for the point of adaptation, which is just that point where you take control of your responses through your breath. Again, your body is going to present you with all kinds of things, but the breath can ultimately silence all of that. So like I was saying with Wim, he had had the presence of mind to know through his practices, through his breathing, that he could enter into these various states of stress. And so, you know, you want to go in for about, I don't know, I mean, you can, as you're building up, you're going to accumulate time. What we're concerned with people entering ice water is what's known as the after drop. And this is actually, I mean, it's a sense of hypothermia. It could potentially happen in the cold water if you're exposing yourself for too long. That's why we want to do it gradually. But it's also something that once you exit the cold can actually become very problematic. So some people actually can get into the cold and feel very comfortable in the cold for, you know, a few minutes and feel good and be happy to stay in. But when they exit, the warm and the cold blood mix together. So the warm blood that's all now moved to the core to protect the organs, to protect the primitive parts of the brain, you know, to basically keep you alive, is now being flooded in with the cold blood from the extremities. So what makes the Wim Hof practice unique and sort of the intellectual property of the Wim Hof practice is its training post-ice exposure. So that once you've actually gotten the stimulus, which is the thermogenetic release that comes from the exposure to the ice, you know, I have a lot of experience with ice water, and I do, you know, weekly exposures, you know, multiple times a week, quite often. And one of my favorite ways to get into the ice water is to get in kind of quickly and go all the way in, all the way under immediately, right? So, you know, just head under, everything under, and then stay there. This is a way that I've seen Wim do often. And so once I come from that, you come up and you catch your breath, and then you settle in the water. And ultimately, I have found that by recruiting the mammalian dive response, which is getting your face wet, sort of really get this overarching sense of what it is. But anybody who's experienced shivers knows what thermogenesis is, because this is your body activating to try and get warm. You know, the shivers is you trying to get warm. And ultimately, the more you expose yourself to the cold, the more you know, you'll become, you know, really aware of these centers in the body that generate tremendous amounts of heat. And so that heat, though we won't speculate with the Wim Hof method. I'll speculate more into my own personal experience and my own practice, you know. We don't promote this as a part of method, but I'll just say that taking the thermogenesis and actually manipulating it is something that is very possible. And what it does is it creates this almost ability to generate warmth from the core due to the warmth already being there, creating an amplification of it and resonate outward, so that the cold blood doesn't rush in the same way. Instead, it moves away. And the heat, which, you know, the palms of the hands are centers of the body that resonate a lot of heat, or, you know, you can lose a lot of heat with your hands too. These areas, you know, the idea of like moving the heat outward as far to the fingertips and the toes as you can is a practice of like I would say awareness, but it needs an impetus. It needs something to get it going. So what we do with the Wim Hof method is post ice training, we do the horse stance work. And if you've ever seen a Wim Hof video, you've probably seen people doing this motion where they're pushing and pulling around their body. And these are moves that you kind of get when you train with Wim and you learn some stuff. But ultimately, that horse stance kind of staying present with the cold, but giving your body this sort of release of the lactate energy, and this it's I don't want to go too far off, but there's an aspect of it that is, it has to be felt to be understood.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so if you've never had the feeling, it would be hard, and it would sound esoteric, or maybe like some kind of pretentiousness that is not really what it is. It's very real. The heat, your body wants to generate heat after it's been cold, and that can be amplified and manipulated. So again, the real gold is the post-ice training with the Wim Hof Method. And that's where the unification of all three things come together. The cold stimulus, the breath work that you've isolated in its own practice, and the mindset. The breath work at that point takes a little bit of a different shape. So we don't want to apply the breath work in the exact same way. I would give a recommendation for post-ice training to breathe through your nose as much as you can. Nose breathing is optimal. Breathing in and out through the nose, or breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, this is optimal breathing. And what we're trying to do is warm the air, which the nose does. So breathing in and out through the nose is a great way to kind of help manipulate the heat in the body.
Wow, absolutely love this whole method, right? And the way you just walked us through. And like you say, like the most important aspect of all of this is just practicing it and experiencing it, because you can talk about this all that you want, like intellectual, right? There's so much science, there's so many studies behind this and all that prove how it works. But at the end of the day, for our listeners, the only way to really like understand this method, understand the power, understand why there's hundreds of thousands of people around the world practicing this every day, is by actually experimenting and trying it out. And even just, if it's the 5-minute breath workout, right? If it's just, 1 minute cold shower, just experiencing the feeling of what you're going to feel like after you've done this, right? And it's most likely it's going to wow you. Like it's going to really blow you away. So I'm really curious now about the mindset piece, right? I mean, it's so interesting, especially, for us athletes. Like I come from a running background, right? And we have a lot of athletes listening to this, because I think the mindset that you practice through getting in the ice and staying calm, right? It's like the exact same mindset. If you're running a marathon, you're pushing on those last few miles and you're in that pain, but you have to learn how to keep going, right? How to stay in that ice, how to stay in that race with your mind, right? Mentally engaged, mentally focused, mentally aware, and keep pushing and keep fighting. And it's the exact same in any sport, right? You just build this mental muscle. So I mean, there's the whole, meditation aspect of it. What other kind of practices are there for training the mind?
Well, I mean, it's really about defining what mindset is. And to me, through the method, I would say what I've learned is it's having presence of mind. So when you're, when you're approaching the ice, you have to make a decision that you're going to get in. Usually it takes a few breaths, and then either, depending on how you're entering, I find that to enter it calmly is more difficult. And so you have to, you have to have a mind that is very focused at the task at hand. And I think that whenever you're pushing deep into something, it's important to do this. Now, how do you approach it is another aspect of the mindset. So not only am I saying, okay, to me, it's very simple. It's willpower, right? So mindset is will, and will is very important. But when it's backed or partnered, coupled with love, then it becomes something that is indomitable. So if you decide that this is what I'm going to do. And then you have the intention coming from a center of love. And love is a big word that means a lot to a lot of people, right? So it's one of these things that maybe is hard to define. And the way I would define it as, it's a feeling. So you can say the word love and it can mean very little, or you can feel it and it can mean quite a bit, right? So it's when I say love, what I'm saying is, it's sort of like a joy. I'm a runner as well. I like to run, and I was influenced by the book Born to Run.
Yeah.
And when you listen to the talk about the Tarahumara people, you know they talk about the excessive joy that they find in the distance running, right? So there's so much joy, you know, where you could have the most serious and highly competitive runner who's doing very well, being paced by someone who's just at ease and enjoy with the moment, you know? And so I think that this is really important. And I think I've spent a lot of time around people who have practiced meditations and various things, a lot of time. And what I will say that you find with people who spend a good bit of time meditating is they are able to access joy in a way that is extremely powerful and pure. And so whether it be that I've spent time with Veda Buddhist monks who resonate love and compassion and joy just nonstop through laughter and just embrace. They're great people. And, you know, and I've spent time with Wim, who is very much autodidactical in this practice, that he's taught himself so many things, and through just exposure to hard nature and it shaping him, you know. And what does he come back with? He comes back with joy. Yeah. So I think the idea that you can consciously intertwine these things and overcome the aspects of the mind that would create resistance, and maybe not even overcome them, maybe convince them to go along for the ride as well. I mean, I really think that the joy creates more doorways into the parasympathetic responses. So your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, is this, you know, intertwining of sympathetic, fight and flight, and then your parasympathetic, feed and breed kind of system that you know, you can't separate them fully, but like the yin and the yang, they can be dominant. Even though there will always be a little bit of yin and yang and a little bit of yang and yin, you can still have the dominant, right? And, you know, in a culture that likes a world culture now that's talking about, you know, gender fluidity and all of these things, I think it's really important that we don't get caught up in the physical flesh, but more understand the energies and their manifestations, you know, because this is what's so important. And so what I've seen is that when you can tap into joy, when you can tap into kindness, when you can tap into these things, and what I'm actually saying is into the viscera, when you have a reaction to something, and maybe you did something kind, or you can actually have the feeling of it. So the feeling is what is so important. It's losing the connection to our senses of feeling things that can really guide our intention. So to me, it's the layering of the will and the intention driven by the nervous system that is prepared to actually put forward the feelings necessary to really steer it, is what mindset is.
Wow. You know, I love that so much. And I truly believe, I mean, the purpose of life is to fall more deeply in love with life. And that's what this practice does, right? It's essentially like like emptying that cup you have, right? So you can fill it up again with all the positive stuff, with the beauty, with the love, with the joy, with the peacefulness, with the gratitude, right? And it's like, in doing that, you allow yourself to create joy and create happiness and create fulfillment almost out of nothing, right? And I think that's another key point here, is like, you don't have to wait for the outside world to tell you it's okay to feel grateful. You can feel happy now. You can be fulfilled now. But you can create those things through this practice, through this daily method of doing the breathing and doing the cold exposure and doing the focusing and the meditation and the mindfulness and becoming aware. You can create that happiness on a daily basis without having to wait for these outside results. And so I love what you're saying here.
Yeah, man. I mean, all we have is ourselves from this standpoint. You can't face anything with people, even if you're right next to somebody, they can't make you feel anything. So you determine these things, and we have to understand that. I believe at first it has to be conscious to make the shifts necessary in the nervous system. But then after a while, it becomes like an upgrade on the system. And that upgrade is like a higher automation. So we function higher because, we have done all the work prior. And so I do believe that the daily repetitions are really important. And then, you will get what you're working for. It's very much like martial arts, which is what my background is in. For a lot of years, I've been training various types of martial arts. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is our focus. And what happens in martial arts is you're conditioning yourself to be able to respond to a situation should something occur. We do it in a sport format in a lot of ways, but that even makes it more complex, because you're working against other people who also know exactly what you're doing, versus a situation in regular self-defense where quite often people who create situations of violence are usually uncontrolled. And so those people usually aren't really trained. I mean, quite often. And so, you don't ever feel in serious danger. And that's where the confidence aspect comes through in martial arts. Is if you train a lot and you know that what you're doing works, then when you are in scenarios, you feel much more confident and comfortable. And, and your responses will be much clearer. So, it's the same for breath work. Isolating breath work, if you train it all the time, you're going to become aware of where your breathing lies, and where and how you can respond with it. And, in the moment, under stress, so, I think I lost track of the question. I'm sorry, but,
No, it's cool.
but honestly, yeah, I mean, it's just that you find, through all of it, that, linking all of the aspects together, bringing it all together, that what it gives you is much more confidence in your own ability to deal with multiple sources of stress.
Yes, for sure. And just talking for a personal example, what I've also noticed is then you start almost automatically applying some of these techniques throughout your day, right? So like you may be practicing it in the morning, right? I'm doing the breathing every morning. And then, I'm sitting in a meeting later on, maybe, and maybe it's the discussion is a little bit heated or whatever. And I start automatically, I feel myself like doing some deeper breathing. I start automatically using some of these techniques to calm myself down without like having to think about it as much, right? Whereas before, like if you're not used to the breathing, if you're not used to doing these practices, you probably wouldn't even think about it, would never do actually that to calm yourself down. And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on before when we're talking about emotion, right? Because I think one of the biggest challenges that people have if they want to live a happy life, right? They want to feel peaceful, they want to feel grateful, they want to feel excited every day, but it's all cognitive. Like it's all in their minds, and they're trying to use like positive thinking, like, yes, I'm happy, yes, I'm grateful, whatever, but they're not actually feeling it. They're not actually embodying it. And I think that's where the power of this practice is because it literally fundamentally, like neurochemically in our brain, wires us for happiness. It creates those neurochemicals, right? Of endorphins, of serotonin that will make you happy. And there's like, and I think that is something that is so overlooked, is mastering the body and mastering the neurochemistry of happiness and of joy and of fulfillment if we want to feel happy, rather than just trying to think our way to these feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the cold is such a great tool, because you can have such an amazing shift between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And when it happens is, initially is in the adaptation moment. So when you make that conscious shift, like, I'm in control here, you're owning that space for the amount of time that you're there, you're in control, you're doing your breathing, you're relaxing, you're paying very close attention to the way your body is responding to the cold. And then you exit the cold and you begin your warming practice. And then once that is all complete, there'll be a very clear shift from the moment you enter that ice that was super intense to this sense of complete calm and peace, very much like you might feel when you enter your house and you're really just letting go of like the week and stress of life, and you just you come home and you feel good. This type of feeling is this is the parasympathetic access. And so this gives you a very visceral sense of like what these two expressions of the nervous system are. And this gives you a great ability to sort of recall. You can tell, okay, my body is a little bit stressed. I'm a little in this heightened sense, you know what I mean? Because of whatever it is that's causing it. Or I'm not achieving parasympathetic. I think we're into a very interesting place in that a lot of people probably feel under house arrest right now. And that situation, if we're really looking at it around the world, that situation takes away the peace at home. And this can be quite devastating, man. And this is why it's so important that we learn how to downregulate and essentially adapt, so that we can adjust and not have a new normal, but instead bring that that heightened sense back to the normal we want it to be, and so I think it's very important that that we get that first, that impetus that shows us, like, it's like it would be way better for you to train with people, let's say in martial arts, that are your friends, that care about you, before you have to go into competition and fight somebody that doesn't care about you. So it's a good idea to that way you can work out all of the kinks, right? And this is the same idea here. Get that real sense, and then that heightened awareness to learn. I read it as an empowerment, and that wasn't, I didn't come to it because I needed it to help my health per se, but what it showed me was really fast how imbalanced I was with certain emotions. And it really taught me a great lesson, that access into the parasympathetic, because when in those deep parasympathetic states, you're very calm, you're very cognitive. So you have a real clear view of things, I think, or at least a lot clearer than you normally would when you're just, where things can be a little cloudy sometimes, right? Where we can get a little caught in our emotions. The ice work is very much a cleanser. So when you go through the process, I mean, I think that's probably why things like baptism were done in cold water. I mean, real, these ideas of like the waters will cleanse you. There's a lot of kind of joking parallels that we make with the ice training and the breathing and everything as being like a church, but it's not. I mean, it's just this idea that, look, it's very hard to separate the breathing from a practice that is, almost like spiritual. I mean, the concepts of inspiration is a great word to look at, because it was not, the inspirato was not, it wasn't separate. The spirit and the breath were all the same. And I think that this is really important. When we look at old cultures, we can learn so much from antiquity. And if we pay attention, the way that they perceived the breath, it was so precious. And I think it was because of how precious every day was, in so many ways, and I think that maybe we should try to get lessons in that, in that respect, because the breath is so important. We enter this world on a single breath, we leave on a breath. So for me, how it's impacted me is it's altered everything. It really changed my athletic performance overall. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, so I'm always looking for optimization. And like I said, it's led me down various paths at the same time. So I've looked at so many things that I feel like are in line with this, that create movement rich work, say with the breathing, for instance. And you can even back up and say that the breathing has helped correct my posture quite a bit. So there's been lots of things that I've used the breath work for in an overall health system to really make me a better performer, just in functionality in life. I have kids and a wife, and I have other responsibilities outside of my training, and I want to be performing at my best all the time. And I give so much credit to the breath training as being the thing that is really most important. It's really the first thing I do every morning. So it's a great tool, and it makes sense because it's our life force. It makes sense to exercise the thing that for so long we couldn't separate the breath from the spirit. It was all the same. And the concept of like pneuma, if you're familiar with this, this idea that breath and spirit and life and all of these things are a gift. Like I was saying, automation, it stays with you. It's programmed into the nervous system. Real changes don't occur until they occur at the nervous system level, And so I think that we have to feel this first, and then we can become aware of it and then manipulate it. It's very much out of a plane. The first jump is going to be very disorienting, but after you do it many times, you can do all kinds of tricks, and it can be amazing experience. You're holding off to throw the parachute, you're free falling longer, all of these things. And, and this is how we can enter into any stress state once we have that sensor, we are to it, through the feeling.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely love that. And I'm super curious, like, how has that affected your own, like, physical practice? We mentioned before, you're very accomplished in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, martial arts, training people there. Like, how's it affected your own athletic performance?
Well, the breath work has done a lot for me, because it's like anything that I spend a good bit of time studying. It always opens up doors to other things, So for me, I had, I was always, the reason I came to the breath work again, or to the Wim Hof Method even, I should say, is because I perceived it as a pneuma was a group that, sort of, it's where we get the word pneumonia from. And it was a word that, truly showed the perspective that life was a gift, you know,
Yeah.
and it was a gift of the breath, you know. And so I mean, you know, there's a lot of ways you can perceive it. I just think that what's beautiful about the Wim Hof method is that they shake the speculation, and they look at it like, what can we confirm? And this is what we confirm the breath will do for you. So the anecdotes are all very nice. And lots of people have said that the breath work does this for them or that for them, but we know specifically what it should do for all of us. And so I highly recommend looking at the Wim Hof Method page for that information. You know, again, my own personal quest is I integrated the method in as a part of my own practice, and then I became an instructor for it. But I also have these other interests that I do feel there is a connective link, and where that link is, I believe, lies in nature. In that nature ultimately is what created the Wim Hof method, but it's also what Wim would give credit towards, you know. And so how we interact with nature, with our bodies, you know, how we move across the terrain, for instance, how we you know, how we breathe. You know, one of the best ways to build gut flora is to expose yourself to multiple areas around the world and just breathe. Go to the beach, then go to the mountains, then go to the city, then go and breathe in all these various environments, and it really helps to build gut flora. So our bodies want to interact with nature, you know, putting our feet on the ground. I mean, I could go into so many various things. One thing that I'm really interested at the current moment is, you know, looking at how our bodies move very much in, well, they move in the same patterns that, you know, that nature is in accordance with. Like, you know, particular, I could go into the mathematics and so forth, but things that have been talked about for many years, but we tend to lose sight on perfection of what we have. And, you know, I think maybe in the current scenario that we're in right now, people are gaining a new perspective on things, I hope, that, you know, kind of helps them go back, and you can get back. And by going back a little bit, I mean, you know, looking at just what is primary in our life, and nature really exposes that, you know, the things that are so necessary. And you know, so for me, my interaction with nature is hugely important, and I believe that the Wim Hof method was one of those things that really helped open me up to more understanding, you know. So to me, I think anybody, or I really believe for anybody, you should try to find the things that resonate with you, and study them. Go for the things that you love, and really apply yourself to those things. But, you know, realize that the breath is going to interact with every single thing you do, everything you do. So if you were going to just take one thing, I can't think of more time when we're so worried about practice the breath work, you know. And that wouldn't be the one takeaway from training with me, would be, no, just train your breath, and then everything else will grow from there, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Such a beautiful and powerful philosophy. Absolutely love it. Now, Brandon, before we wrap it up here, where can people connect with you online?
Well, so I have a brand new business that we're launching. It's called PHYR, PHYR. Our website is onfire.com. This will take you to a blog that's actually launching today. You can find us online, or you can find me at, I have an Instagram site, Brandon Powell 396. And that, you can see a bunch of the work and the different things we've been doing there. And then this will all filter into the PHYR social media that is going to be launched in April. So we'll have everything there, you know, like I said, either through Instagram, Facebook, everything is PHYR. Online right now, we have a PHYR members page. So if you look up PHYR on Facebook, it'll take you to our members page. If you want to get in and check out our info, just press that you want to come in and we'll let you in. And that's basically where you can find me on social media. And then hopefully once everything starts moving around again, we'll be back in action doing lots of workshops all over the place. So, you know, please come out and try one of our workshops and see what you think.
For sure, for sure. So final question, what does it mean for you to max out your life?
To max out my life means to live complete with full intention and will, moving in the direction that I feel is best.